You want to know how a defense team knows they've been having a brutal morning? It's when they spend 3 hours cross-examining a witness who has portrayed their own client as Cruella de Vil. And when they sit down and they're finally done with their cross-examination, the judge looks at the prosecution and says, "Redirect?" And they stand up and say, "No questions, Your Honor." That's how you know you've had a bad day. When the prosecution isn't concerned about anything you elicited at all in 3 hours, you know you had a bad day. That's a bad day. And I have to tell you, the prosecution was right, because the defense had a very bad day. A very tough time with Mr. Alessi. Frequently, comments that he made, or questions that he was being asked by Mr. Pagliuca, who really struggled, the witness would bite back snarkily at him with a quick jab and another punch at Ghislane Maxwell. For example, when he's asked about being able to keep up with the manual, he said, "You didn't really like to follow the manual." So he said, "No, it was slavery." It was another punch at Ghislane Maxwell. Just over and over, moments like that would come up, and the room around me would be chuckling audibly, because he would just keep punching back at how Ghislane Maxwell was such a terrible human being. In fact, there was even testimony that was elicited that didn't really come out as clearly on direct when he asked a question trying to imply that Mr. Alessi was involved in recruiting girls for Jeffrey Epstein, and that he too was part of this whole scheme, as if that was his role. And Mr. Alessi responded by saying he drove Ghislane Maxwell around from Boca Raton to Jupiter, Florida, touring every massage parlor they could, massage schools, looking for girls that they could find to bring home to his house to give massages to him in private. And that basically it was just another opportunity to not just say that Mr. Alessi wasn't involved in it, but he was constantly under the direction of Ghislane Maxwell in trying to help Jeffrey Epstein find more girls that he can get massages from. So the other problem that he had is when he tried impeaching Mr. Alessi by bringing in various affidavits or depositions that he had taken in other private actions. So he would try to take words that Mr. Alessi was swore under oath that they were true, and say, "Well, this is contradicting what you're saying here in your testimony today." And one of the things that doesn't play in a transcript, when you guys are reading the transcript, and you are following that, you can't appreciate is this: Mr. Alessi is not a native English speaker. He was born in Quito, Ecuador, and some of his phraseology is very different from the way Native Americans speak. Now, when he speaks, it's really clear and evident to anyone who's hearing him, from his tone and the way he's speaking, what message he's trying to convey. But if you actually look at the words, just read the words sometimes have the exact opposite meaning of what is obvious that he's trying to convey. So, for example, if there's a question saying, he would be questioned saying, "Well, you said, I used to call to get girls to come to the house." And he's questioned about that, saying, "You see, you used to go out, try to call to get girls to come to the house." And he would say, "No, I never call girls. I never call girls. I never call girls. Mr. Epstein said call girls. He knows. I call." But it's like, it's obvious that, like, okay, I can understand how in a deposition he would make a statement saying, "I call girls." But he doesn't mean I'm recruiting girls. I'm trying to find new girls. It's Jeffrey Epstein would say, call a girl, call Joni, and he would call Joni, and he would give him the number. He would be the one to make the phone call, because that's what Jeffrey Epstein, or frequently Ghislane Maxwell, would tell him to do. So he'd be like, "Oh, okay, you want me to call Joni? I'll call Joni." It's not he's going out and looking for Joni. He's not finding Joni. He's calling whatever name and number he's being told to call and scheduling her to come at 10 o'clock. In fact, at one point, and this was something that really blew up in Pagliuca's face, and I was wondering what he was even thinking asking this line of questions, is that he started saying things like, "So you used to call the girls that you were told to call?" "Yes." "And you would sometimes drive and pick up girls?" "Yes." "And you sometimes would set up the massage table?" "Yes." And you would direct them to come into the house? Yes, and you would be responsible for paying them. So and then he started explaining how the payment process goes, and how that would operate with the checks or cash. He spent a couple minutes on that, and then Paliuka would say, "And you weren't involved in sex trafficking, were you?" And the state says, "Objection sustained." So, because the objection is that it was calling for a legal conclusion, but the point here is, so what do you? It sounds so empty. It sounds so stupid to try and compare this guy who was clearly a minion to what Ghislaine Maxwell was doing, that it doesn't read as if, oh, okay, you're making points with the jury. It just came across as if you're trying so desperately to compare something which is thoroughly incomparable that I think you just lose points for coming across as being thoroughly disingenuous. So, and apparently the prosecution agreed with me, because they basically said no questions. So all in all, it came across like it was a terrible morning. They made no ground. If anything, by the time they were done, I thought Ghislaine Maxwell looked worse than before the cross-examination began. So that's what happened this morning. The follow-up after the cross-examination, the state called on a police officer named Gregory Parkinson, who started talking about a visit that he made back in 2005. And all we've gotten so far is that he was giving out the layout of the property and describing what it looked like in 2005. He made reference to a search warrant that was issued at that time and how they searched the house, but we have no idea what they found as of yet. Unfortunately, as many of you know, I'm not going to be able to go back into the trial this afternoon. I'm going to have to catch up on transcripts like the rest of you. And for the balance of testimony, I will be back here, God willing, Monday morning. And I urge you that if you want more updates from me and you want to find out more in-depth detail about how this case is proceeding, please make sure you like, share, subscribe, and you must hit the bell. I'm constantly being told by people, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how YouTube unsubscribed me from you. I see numbers just dropping by the hundreds over a period of an hour sometimes, because that's what YouTube does. So I urge you, make sure you hit the bell and catch my live streams. I live stream nightly, Sunday to Thursday, from 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern. So you really want to catch that. That's where I go and tell. This channel is Maxwell House. That's all we're doing till this trial is done. It is the House of Maxwell. I'm just fixated here, I'm locked in, and I'm the only attorney here. So make sure you stick around. Till Sunday night, take care of yourself, great weekend, Godspeed.